Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X. A very, very warm welcome to Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. Yes, you are seeing this properly. This is a selfie after the Superman Legacy table read. A group selfie of James Gunn, Peter Safran, and the rest of the cast. What's interesting about this picture, we had a new cast reveal. And it's an actor who has been cast to play Otis in Superman Legacy. Now, the character of Otis may be familiar with some of you from Superman the movie and unfamiliar with other fans. So let's get into this conversation. Because really, the main meat of today's DC Universe Daily is talking about chasing the Superman 78 kind of movie. Chasing the lightness, the humour of that movie. And is the casting of this actor as Otis evidence that they're chasing that mould? Now, if we go back to the Superman radio show, it was a very original take at Superman. The Superman radio show fundamentally changed the concept of Siegel and Schuster. It changed the name of the editor to Perry White. It changed the name from the Daily Star newspaper to the Daily Planet. It was the radio show that claimed the concept and name Kryptonite. It may even be the radio show that first come up with the idea of Superman flying. I'm not sure about that one. Because in the original Siegel and Schuster concept, Superman used to leap from skyscraper to skyscraper. He didn't actually fly. Why are we talking about this? Why am I mentioning this? Well, please bear with me, because it has a lot to do with the casting of this actor as Otis. And, maybe James Gunn chasing the Superman 78 mold, which I think is a huge mistake. So that's the radio show. So what you see from that radio show is something that is very contemporary for that time and modernizes Superman. Then we had the television show. Now, The Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves, Phyllis Coates, blah, 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 and later on Noah O'Neill as Lois Lane. First it was Coates, Phyllis Coates, then it was Noah O'Neill, who replaced her as Lois Lane. That came very quickly after the concept of television was invented. Television was a very young medium when that show came on. Again, it was a very contemporary version of Superman. Very pure, very family friendly, but very different to the radio show. It was a product of its time, as was the radio show. It was modern. It was contemporary. They weren't chasing after what the radio show did. So after George Reeves allegedly killed himself, they couldn't make any more of those shows, which was a huge tragedy. Of course, they did try and do a Superboy series, but it never worked out. So anyway, then we go to Superman 78, starring Christopher Reeve as the Man of Steel. Nothing like The Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves. It was contemporary, it was very faithful to the character from the comics, but it was very, very contemporary. And it was trying to capture the positive nature of the character. America had just got out of Vietnam. There was the whole Watergate thing. So they were trying to bring positivity back to American cinema. And they succeeded. But it was also contemporary. It was also very, very new. So if we jump past the sequels, the Christopher Reeve sequels, right, there was that. Then there was the Superboy TV show that really was about Superboy living in Smallville and being Superboy. It went for about 4 seasons. And again, it was very contemporary. It was very faithful, I suppose, to the Christopher Reeve version, but it didn't copy and paste everything. It was its own thing. right? So they did that. So there's that version. Then you've got Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Gee whiz, Jesus Christ. This is nothing like any live action version of Superman ever made. You can tell maybe the budget wasn't that big, but Dean Cain wasn't necessarily someone I would have chosen to play Superman, but Terry Hatcher, Lane Smith, brilliant actors that held that show on its shoulders. And it was a romantic comedy that had never been done before, but it worked. It was moonlighting between Clark and Lois and Superman at the Daily Planet. That's what that show was. Very different. But then we had the groundbreaking Smallville. Smallville was inspired by Jeff Loeb's Superman for All Seasons. It's about a young Clark Kent who doesn't become Superboy in Smallville, but he has trials and tribulations. He basically, the question our Miles, the creators of Smallville, asked, why is Superman a hero? And they answered that question for over a decade of that show. Why does Lex Luthor become a megalomaniac? They answered that question. Wow, they may have even done Lex Luthor's pre-Superman story better than they did Clark Kent's. But the one thing Smallville did, yes, it used the Williams Superman theme now and again. It used a multitude of Superman the movie actors like Sir Christopher Reeve. I call him Sir Christopher Reeve. He's not officially Sir Christopher Reeve. He fucking should be. But anyway, so Sir Christopher Reeve was in Rosetta and Legacy, 2 episodes. It was, brilliant for young fans to see that original Superman and see the passing of the baton from Christopher Reeve to Tom Welling. But Smallville broke canon upon canon. It was, even though it used those it had cameos for Margot Kidder, Mark McClure, who played Jimmy Olsen. It was his own thing. And even though it used the Williams theme sometimes, even in the series finale, it was its own thing. Smallville was very different. It wasn't in the canon for Lex and Clark to be friends for 7 years. Well, they weren't friends for 7 years, but they were friends at the beginning of the show. That wasn't something that was part of comic book canon. They broke the canon. In the original canon, Kryptonite doesn't come with Superman and there's not meteor freaks. That was very, very different. The Fortress of Solitude doesn't rise 5 years before he becomes Superman. We saw it in Superman the movie and different comic books that, sometimes it comes in different stages. So they broke canon there as well. The Kawatche Caves. There was no Kawatche Caves in the original canon of the comics. Smallville was its own thing. Again, a very, very contemporary show. But then we get to Superman Returns that wants to copy and paste Superman the movie. I love Superman Returns, but it couldn't make its mind up whether it was a remake of Superman the movie or something new. It tried to do both, and it had the pacing of the 1978 movie. Superman Returns is evidence of chasing after the Superman 78 mold and how it's a mistake. So then you get to Man of Steel, which is a very contemporary movie, a product of its time, directed by Zack Snyder, written by, legendary director Christopher Nolan and, the legendary writer, I think he's a legendary writer, David S. Goyer. They were the ones, Chris co-wrote and directed the Dark Knight trilogy, and David wrote all the screenplays for the Dark Knight trilogy, right? And they put that movie together. Very contemporary, very serious, with some great messaging around the environmental kind of thing, and, the thing where we're looking for other planets for humans to live on, and, Zod and the Kryptonians coming to Earth. But it was very, very contemporary, and it was its own thing. Now, there was a lot of inspirations from Smallville on that movie, and you can tell if you look closely enough, because Zach and his kids watched Smallville together. But it was its own thing. The Snyderverse was absolutely its own thing. And this is my point. If we look at the most, I suppose the most contemporary versions of Superman that did their own thing, Superman the movie, The New Adventures of Superman, the radio show, which was utterly pioneering, as we've just discovered if you didn't know that. A lot of the concepts you know of Superman today are because of that radio show, not because of the original concept of Siegel and Schuster. The radio show dramatically changed a lot of things that stuck and are part of the mythos today. So Superman in live action and on the radio show have always been able to reinvent itself for the time it's in. And the reason I want to talk about this is because James Gunn is giving us a Miss Tessmacher, who was created for Superman the movie. And now, since that group selfie, we know there's going to be an Otis. Now, if you don't know who Otis was, he was in Superman the movie, the 1978 movie. He was dopey, he was clumsy, he wasn't the full ticket. Oh, gee, Mr. Luthor. He was great at the time. We all loved him as kids when we watched that movie. But this is my point. Now, I don't want to make any assumptions about Superman Legacy. I've tried to not make any assumptions about what that movie is going to be. People making assumptions that it's a Kingdom Come movie could be wrong. I think they're wrong. I think we may see many versions of Superman in this movie. Maybe, maybe not. I'm happy to take the L if I'm wrong. And I'm happy if it's a Kingdom Come movie. The problem is, if it's a Kingdom Come movie, the mainstream audience and normies are not really going to understand what's going on. And it may not be relevant to them. So I'm not convinced it's a Kingdom Come movie. But considering we know originally James was going to have some war in the Middle East, and now he's changed it geographically, so there's going to be some kind of war going on. I think there's going to be a debate whether or not Superman should be involved in the battles of mankind. Now, this is a concept that I came up with my Superman movie script, my fan fiction, many years ago. The main idea in the modern era was Manchester Black and the elite wanting to kill Metallo, and Superman saying, "I will not kill Metallo." And then Superman having flashbacks to the Second World War, where he refuses to take part in that war. I think this is a concept that James Gunn could be playing with, whether or not Superman should interfere unilaterally. Now, we know that Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice already had those themes, so it'll be interesting what Snyderverse fans have got to say if, in fact, this is kind of the themes of Superman Legacy. But I've tried not to make any assumptions on what the movie is going to be, unlike some. Because I think there's a lot of fans out there getting so hyped, overhyped, I think they're going to be disappointed. It was my fears for Zack Snyder's Justice League were, oh my God, I'm hyping this up. My vivid imagination is thinking it's going to be this great Justice League movie. And Zack Snyder's Justice League is one of the few times where I've over-anticipated a movie, but in fact, the finished movie was much better than I ever imagined it would be. Most of the time these days, I'm underwhelmed, and there's no surprise there with what's going on today in entertainment. But with the introduction of Otis, I am concerned that Superman Legacy and James Gunn are chasing and trying to mimic Superman the movie in the colour and the humour of that movie. And I think that would be wrong. And I've always been very, very consistent. I don't mind you having Superman as an inspirational figure, being very faithful to what he is in the comics, a bit more lighter, not as darker as the Snyder films were. I understand that a lot of people want that. I get that, right? But we've noticed with last year's DC movies how they're chasing this cringy colour and these cringy gags. And last year's movies flopped. People rejected that concept. It's interesting, actually. Yesterday I was watching a video where Mauler, if you've heard of him, the YouTuber Mauler, who rips apart modern day movies, he does it brilliantly, and The Critical Drinker. The Critical Drinker is obsessed with lighter toned and fun movies, and they were watching Star Trek IV, which is a lighter movie. And he was saying it was good that they did a lighter movie because Star Trek 2 and 3 were very dark. And I think people couldn't, and he said, I don't think people could handle another dark movie. But if I had the honour and opportunity to talk to The Critical Drinker, I'd say this, but Drinker, what were the most successful movies in the Star Trek movie franchise? That's right, the Dark Star Trek 2 and the Dark Star Trek 3. Doesn't that tell you something? Because there's depth, there's honor, there's characterizations that we'll never forget. No one will ever forget the ending of Wrath of Khan and Kirk saying goodbye to Spock. It was emotional. It was, I wouldn't say it's uplifting, but it made us cry. And in Star Trek 3, when they're reunited and he goes after his friend to bring him back, it's a great two-part story. People will remember the dark, compelling stories. It's not necessarily dark, they're just compelling. Did people watch episodes of 24 and go, oh, this is so depressing, we need Jack Bauer sitting on a rocking chair holding his grandchildren and, you know, Kim bringing him a cup of coffee? I don't want Jack Bauer going around torturing people and being excited. Of course we fucking loved it. We didn't want 24 to change, and thank God it didn't. That's my point. There was so much annoyance from certain people that, you know, Snyder took his DC seriously and wanted to make 3 serious DC movies. In fact, he wanted to make more than that. There was this thing that, you know, there should be light, there should be fun, there should be some comedy. They shouldn't be taken seriously. I remind you something James Gunn always says prior to getting involved with DC, that comic book characters are silly. And, you know, they shouldn't be, you know, he doesn't feel they should be taken seriously. You know, that's interesting, considering if you go and watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where it's a very, very dark, serious story, there's still some comedy. Peacemaker has some very dark themes as well. Again, it has some silly James Gunn comedy, but there's some dark elements to Peacemaker, very dark elements to Peacemaker, a son versus an abusive father. I enjoyed it. Now, obviously, the first Guardians is a bit more lighter, but a lot of people compared the first Guardians to Star Wars, and I always said it's nothing like Star Wars, and that's why it was good, because it was kind of a modernized version of Star Wars. Of course, the Guardians comics had been out there for many, many years. Not many people had heard of them. And one of my concerns when I first heard James was going to write, then direct the Superman movie was that he's always been very good at writing for groups of characters. Characters that society maybe put their noses up. You know, characters that haven't always done the right thing. And there's no question, Superman isn't within his comfort zone. I noticed on X a fan asking a very interesting question. Is James Gunn a Superman fan? Not that that's important. You know, he could still make a great Superman movie, but it is an interesting question. You know, is he as big a fan of Superman as he is the Guardians of the Galaxy comics, Suicide Squad? And I think this is going to be very, very interesting. But with the, you know, now knowing there's going to be an Otis in Superman Legacy, now that we know there's a missed test marker, and, you know, it kind of gets me to ask another question and another red flag. Could it be that Nicholas Holtz's Lex Luthor is going to be a bit of a joke, a bit of a comedy act? It's very interesting that Nicholas Hoult got cast for this movie, because Nicholas Hoult recently was in a kind of comedy, an ironic comedy with Nicolas Cage. And there's part of me that feels that's why Gunn cast him in this movie, because he could see he could do ironic comedy. And so this Lex Luthor could be a bit of a joke. I don't think Lex Luthor's going to be the main villain of this movie. But that's another interesting question. What kind of Lex Luthor are we going to see? In that group picture we saw that Nix had a skinhead like me. So Lex Luthor is bald in this movie. That's right, and that's proper. That's good. I like that. The truth is, I don't know what this movie is going to be. Nobody knows what this movie is going to be. But as a content creator, the number one thing that's very important for me is trust. You people who have continued to support me over the years, you know, very few of you, but some of you who come in, who will smash a like even if they're not going to watch the video, or still support me, trust me. And I'll tell you what you trust me to do, and I'm going to make an assumption about this, because you know I'm straightforward and I'm honest and I'm just like you. I'm a consumer of entertainment. You know, I love this shit and I'm always going to be direct and honest. I've done videos where I say, yes, I'm excited. James Gunn's a good writer, director. I'm excited about what he's doing next, casting, what he's doing there. It's going to be exciting. Yes, and I stand by that. But I also stand by my concerns because, as I've said many times, it's about balance and it's about genuine honesty. And I see a lot of shills for James Gunn's Superman legacy, and they do make me feel uncomfortable. And there's some content creators who've decided to shill this movie and to defend him with their last breath. Maybe there's no need to defend James Gunn, and it's too late to advise James Gunn. He wouldn't listen to me anyway if it wasn't too late. He's written his script. He's deciding on what he's going to do. But chasing Superman the movie, trying to mimic Superman the movie, is a big mistake. Because as we've seen, I've catalogued so many versions of Superman, the radio show, different live action TV shows. I haven't even mentioned Superman and Lois, which is a very different show to all the other versions as well. It's a contemporary way of looking at Superman as a father, as a husband, and balancing being Superman and a hero at the same time. And it works. So, again, it's Superman being contemporary, being a product of the time that he's in. You cannot recreate Superman the movie. Superman the movie was the first film I ever saw. Like some of you know that. You know I love that movie. I wouldn't be a Superman fan without Superman the movie. And Smallville reinvigorated my love for Superman. But the point is, even as a fan of Superman the movie, I understand you can't chase after that movie. And I'm concerned that maybe Zaslav and Warner Brothers want to chase after that movie. Because it's clear, when they got rid of Snyder, they tried to do these bright and giggly comic book movies. They thought they were, patterning and copying the MCU. But early MCU did have good comedy, but had good movies. And then they became a bad impression of themselves, as we see with Phase 4 and Phase 5. But I think the fact that Snyder took his movies seriously, he took his DC seriously, is something that I appreciated. Because I like serious things. I don't mind laughing. I don't mind watching Superman the movie and looking at Otis and, laughing. He's funny. Ned Beatty is an amazing performance as that character. But we have moved on since 1978, and I've said it many, many times. So I wouldn't care if you used a John Williams theme. I wouldn't care if you did that. It's an iconic theme. It wouldn't be something that upset me. I don't think they will. But I wouldn't care. Smallville used that theme, but it was still a very different show to what they did in 78. Smallville broke canon, as we said, did something very, very different. And for the first time, Smallville made Superman, Clark Kent, should I say, a complex character. And that was one of the most fascinating things about Smallville. It was very, very different. As are all the most successful versions of Superman in live action and including the radio show were successful because they were contemporary and different, and they changed things. We've already catalogued a multitude of things the radio show changed that are still part of the canon today. Amazing. Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Who thought you could make a successful romantic comedy, basically do moonlighting for Lois Lane, Clark Kent and Superman? That was amazing. Different concepts, different ideas for the Man of Steel. So I don't know that James Gunn is chasing or trying to mimic Superman 78. But for me, if he is, it will be a huge mistake. Let's go back to Superman Returns, a movie that doesn't know whether it's, has an identity crisis. Half of it is a remake of Superman the movie, and half of it is going in a new direction. It simply didn't work because it was a piss-poor sequel of Superman 2. It didn't even feel like a sequel of Superman 2. And it also tried to do its own thing, which didn't resonate with people. And the pacing was the slow pacing of Superman 78. And, audiences in the 21st century haven't got the concentration to sit there with that kind of pacing. That's why that film failed. It went after the Superman 78 mold. A director decided to make a Superman movie, Bryan Singer, because he was obsessed with that movie. I'm obsessed with that movie. But if I was making that movie, as I mentioned earlier, I've written my own Superman movie script. I've put something in there that James Gunn could have used in his own movies. That tells you I'm not very far away from what a contemporary movie should be. So hopefully, James Gunn isn't chasing that aesthetic. But it's interesting that he's using a character that was created by Tom Mankiewicz for Superman 78. A character that was very, very comedic. Will Otis be comedic? But I tell you what, Gunn will have another problem because he's cast a gentleman of colour to play Otis. I have no issue with that. But I tell you what, James, the woke mob will be after you if you're taking a black character and making him a dunce, a dope, and clumsy. They will not thank you for that. They will go after you and they will cancel you. Be very, very careful, James, what you're doing with that character. I don't mind a bit of fun in a Superman movie. I don't mind some good comedy. Maybe it will work. But it is concerning that maybe they may take Miss Tessmacher, Otis, and Lex Luthor and make them a joke. We just don't know. And I think he's going to get a lot of blowback if that's his plan. Because, and of course the Shields are saying they'd love Lex Luthor to be a joke. Of course. Yeah, we'd love him to be a joke. Make him a clown, it'd be great. But unfortunately, these are the same people who were, as I keep on saying every day, the people you see shilling Superman Legacy. And there's a difference. I'm excited for Superman Legacy. It's a Superman movie. It's a DC movie. Of course I'm excited. I want it to be good and I want it to do well. But I'll never be a shill, and I do not like shills. They offend the very core of my being. They do, because they don't have any balance. It's all good, it's all great, it's all awesome. You haven't even seen the movie. These are the people who were shilling the Flash movie and never went to watch it in cinemas, then watched it on Max and said, you see, it was really good. Nah, it wasn't. You're just shills. You have no balance to your conversations, and I ain't got no time for people like that. I've got time for people who have a balance, who don't say that the most recent DC movie is a better movie than superior movies. We had that conversation when James Gunn's Suicide Squad came out. People were saying to me, it's the best DCEU movie. No, it's not. If you think it is, good luck to you. You know, I have to respect your opinions, right? Of course I do. But the people saying at the time that James Gunn's Suicide Squad was the best DCEU movie, I bet you don't think that anymore. And this is the problem with being reactive about the latest thing being the best thing. Everybody wants Superman Legacy to be a success and for it to work. I know hardcore Snyder fans probably don't, but I'm talking about fans generally. It has to be a movie that appeals to the normie and the general audience and the comic book nerd. You have to marry those two elements together. That's why I think it's a very dangerous game to do Kingdom Come Superman. Because I think that there's normies who won't, appeal to that. Because it is interesting, because Kingdom Come, in a way, is not exactly the same, but it's kind of the same as doing the Nightmare Future as they did in BVS. That's where we were heading to. That's where that was a potential future in the Snyderverse. And I believe that maybe Kingdom Come may be something, a foreshadowing of something that might happen, rather than us being in a Kingdom Come, universe. I think potentially that's where that Superman of Superman Legacy could head to. But don't make the mistake and the assumption of thinking just because you've seen a Kingdom Come Superman logo that you're getting a Superman Kingdom Come movie. I could be wrong. That's exactly what we could be heading to. But making assumptions about movies that you have not seen yet, that haven't even started shooting yet, is a very dangerous game to play. But I'll say what I said on the beginning of the video. Chasing the Superman 78 mold is a huge mistake. But it goes beyond chasing Superman 78. Chasing after Smallville, chasing after the Lois and Clark rom-com show, whatever. You've got to be bold. You've got to be you. James Gunn has got to go after a contemporary version of Superman. Something that he wants to do. Something new. The Superman radio show wasn't afraid of creating new concepts for Superman, right? Smallville wasn't ashamed or afraid or intimidated to give us new things with the Superman lore, and neither can be Superman Legacy. Now, did that make sense? Neither can, it's the same as Superman Legacy, in other words. It has to be bold, it has to be contemporary like Man of Steel, but not like Man of Steel, its own thing. Man of Steel wasn't intimidated to be its own thing. A first contact alien invasion story, which was a very bold way of going at Superman at the time. Chasing after different versions of the comics, because, he's shown us a comic book cover of All-Star Superman, of Kingdom Come. He's shown us lots of different Superman covers. He can't be adapting them all. Maybe he'll throw different versions in, which will be very, very confusing to normies again. You've got to come up with your own story, with your own Superman, or this will not work.